Awakened Living is a 21st century movement for people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious, who have a deep hunger for connected community and a divine impulse for personal and global transformation. Our mission is to encourage and inspire the awakening of human consciousness. Good evening. Welcome to Awakened Living Television. My name is TJ Woodward. I'm the host of your show. I'm so delighted that you've chosen to be with me and with us this evening as we continue the conversation about conscious recovery and what is conscious recovery. Last week's show was incredibly rich with my guest, Burke, Halinovych, talking about how we are now ushering in a new era in addiction treatment, and that new era involves viewing people and affirming and knowing that in the midst of any type of behavior, there is always a place within that person that is whole and perfect. And that's truly what it means to me to have a holistic approach, to recognize that spiritually the person is whole and perfect, and that addiction was always a strategy to try to manage something that felt disconnected from within. So I recognize in addiction treatment and in the entire conversation of addiction that there is a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspect. We're really talking about this spiritual room, which obviously also affects the other rooms. We're not actually a compartmentalized person. We have these different aspects. So that's really the conversation. Where we left in last week's show, if you didn't get a chance to watch, is we were beginning the conversation of the importance of us doing our own inner work, those of us who are counselors, who are coaches, who are therapists, who are working as treatment professionals. What's the importance of us doing our own deeper spiritual work so that we can be present for another? So that was quite an intro, Burke, but welcome back.
Thank you.
So grateful you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Our time went so quickly the last time. I was very surprised that it went so quickly, and I know there's more to talk about. But if you could begin by letting people know a little bit about you for those who didn't get to watch last week.
Sure. So my name is Burke Halinovych. I'm the program director at Muirwood Adolescent and Family Services up in Petaluma, California, servicing adolescent boys at the residential level. We've got intensive therapeutic work, state-accredited academic component, adventure and experiential therapy, and a very robust family program to really tie in all the systems together and not only treat the individual in a holistic manner, but treat the entire family system. So I'm extremely passionate about the work, and I'm very grateful that you're having me on to talk about it.
Well, I am so grateful, and I have so much respect for you and the work that you've done, and so much respect for Muirwood, and this is just such a perfect partnership. I love Scott, the founder of Muirwood,
absolutely.
and just such an amazing, beautiful being, and I love the depth of his consciousness, which is really what we're talking about today. So when I heard you were going to be the new director there, I was just like feeling so grateful that you have found each other, and so that you can help really people at such a fragile age in their own development, in their own breaking free of this addiction and the family systems. So where we left off last week is we started talking about shame and how our own shame, our own process of working through our own shame informs our work. And off camera, you and I were talking about how like the traditional, therapy, the training, if you will, of becoming a therapist or a counselor is really that we're not supposed to really bring ourselves fully in, that we're this blank canvas. I think you and I know that that's not really actually possible.
Yeah.
So here's the opening question. How important is it for us to do our own deeper work, whether we call that trauma work or our work on shame or our deeper spiritual work? What is the relationship between us doing our own work, and what's the importance of that in working with our clients?
I mean, if you haven't worked on yourself or you're not working on yourself, my question is like, how are you functioning in the field? Because if you're able to compartmentalize your stuff and be of service to other people, you've mastered some level of consciousness that I'm just not aware of. Because I think what the energy that we bring into the room, whether it be due to the interaction we had in traffic on the way in or what's going on with our partners back home or whatever, like we carry that with us whether we know it or not. And I think it shows up in our therapeutic interactions, both on an individual basis and on a staffing basis. I think if you work in a system or an organization where the staff milieu has disruption, or there's fractures in trust, or it's not a safe environment, it manifests in the patient milieu or the client milieu. And so not only do I think it's our due diligence and it's our responsibility to work on ourselves, what a better way to educate yourself. The continuing education process of building a relationship with yourself, building a relationship with your environment, and enriching your knowledge of how you show up in the world and how you can help hold space and navigate another person who's struggling as well.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking, last week's show we talked about the unconscious and the conscious. For most of us, a lot of this is unconscious until it isn't, right? Mm-hmm. In my own work, early in my work, I thought my job was to help someone come up with what their problems were and then help them solve it. And boy, was that, first of all, it's exhausting.
Yes.
It was so exhausting. And I came to a place where I realized that what was really being asked and called of was for me to do my own deeper inner work.
Right.
And I was really just projecting onto the client. Now, what happened for me, there was a pivotal moment where I recognized that I absolutely needed to do whatever I needed to do internally, my own work, so that I could see that client as whole and perfect, mm-hmm. to see that spiritual perfection in them. I remember early in my work in this field, a therapist was struggling with one of the clients, sent me in just to sit with her. I said nothing, and she had this incredible breakthrough. Oh, wow. And the therapist was like, "What did you say?" And I remember saying, "I didn't say anything. I saw the God in her." Mm-hmm. And that was the word that I used at that moment. I have slightly different language now, but I was able to see that place within her. And simply being in that presence, not in my presence, but in that presence, she had the ability in some way to break through. And it's the first time experientially, mm-hmm. I understood at a really deep level that I wasn't the one doing the work. Mm-hmm. Now that was revolutionary for me because I thought my job was to help them do their work. What I recognize now is it's their journey, and I can be here as a presence for that. So anything more you want to say about that?
Yeah, I was taught very early on by a professor who I really respected that the one thing that you absolutely think you need to say to your client in session is the thing you absolutely do not say to your client in session. And early on in my career of really finding my identity within the room, and being like the therapist, the clinician, the counselor, I had that inherent thought that I was supposed to have the answer, or I was supposed to be the person who could do the thing, or that I was supposed to figure this out and lead in some way. And like you said, boy, is that exhausting. Mm-hmm. Not only is that exhausting, it's disruptive for the person. And what I didn't realize is my own inability to sit in silence, my own inability to sit in discomfort with someone who I have a really hard time. Actually, Krista Gilbert pointed this out to me and gave me the language for it. She said, "It really seems like you struggle with watching people struggle." Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's it. So as a therapist, when you're watching people struggle, if you're struggling with their struggle, you're just kind of co-signing on their dysregulation and you're jumping into it. So that comes back to like the work that we do. And the more that you've cleared inside of your body and in your space, your consciousness, whatever you want to call it, the less is going to impede that person who you're trying to hold space for. Yeah. And the less of right now I'm at a point, and I've got a long way to go, but I see myself in my clients all the time. Yeah. And if I can go on somewhat of a mild tangent, it's interesting the trajectory that we take as clinicians. I came in the field working with substance abusing, acting out, aggressive teenagers, treatment-resistant teenagers. Well, at that point in my career, I kind of still was a lot of that. I hadn't done deep work around that. Started working with, family systems, did a lot of my own family work in that way, got into codependency work, did my own codependency work, started working in that way, and I started really not only growing up as an individual, I started really growing up as a clinician. And I had a lot of mentors and teachers that held space for me to do that. Started working in the adult field as I felt like I was maturing and in that place where I could hold space for adults then, because I felt like my maturity, my understanding, my perspective of the world was in line with that and I could do it. And now I'm going back full circle. And I feel like I'm going into the adolescent realm not as that person who could align and join with these teenagers in their struggle, because I get it, I've been there, as more of like that father figure, that uncle figure that's coming and holding space and like, I went through that, I got through that, you can do it too. Let me just hold space and let you be you.
Wow, that's so beautiful, because that really is, we have our own journey of our own awakening, of our own evolution in the midst of all this. And I know you mentioned Krista Gilbert, so I just wanted to honor her.
Shout out to Krista Gilbert.
Yeah, for anyone who's watching this, Krista Gilbert is just, to me, one of the most magnificent souls working in this field, working for Foundations Recovery Network. And she was my very first boss in this field. And my new book, Conscious Recovery, she's one of the people I honor in the opening, saying a person that really sees very clearly, and a person that clearly has done her own inner work, because she's so in touch with her intuitive nature, and it just informs everything. And she just had such an incredible impact on me as my first supervisor in this field, and really saw me through the beginning stages of what we're talking about right now, all the transference. So I want to ask you a specific question about something. We talked about the unconscious and the conscious, and in our last show, and I will not allow my client to go any deeper than I've gone.
Oh, yeah.
Because unconsciously or subconsciously, I'm going to somehow prevent it because it's too scary for me, right? And what do you think about that, or how do you, maybe you can elaborate on that?
You can only take your clients as far and as deep as you've gone yourself. So, I mean, that's indicative of continuing to do the work. But how that shows up, and I've seen this happens in the individual level and the group level, is the unconscious shows up on the clinician's side, where you hit that pocket where you have the countertransference, or you have that reaction of like, I don't know what to do with this. And so you stop the process. It's an organic process. And as clinicians, we're always trying to kind of navigate and tease and hold space and allow people to get to that point for themselves so they can have a new experience, a corrective, more healing experience. But we get in the way a lot. I've gotten in the way plenty of times. I know that. But I think acknowledging that is the first step. And so not only can you only take your clients as far and deep as you've gone, but how willing are you to look at these things? How can you expect someone to do something you're not willing to do yourself? That's another aspect.
Absolutely. I went to this amazing training once where they immediately right out of the gate, before we even said hi or checked in, they put us in dyads and asked us to go really deep. And you could see all these therapists and clinicians really uncomfortable in the room, and the facilitator said, that's what you're asking your clients to do every day. Absolutely. And so it was really a powerful, it's like, oh yeah, this is true. You said something that I wanted to touch on, and that is stopping the process. And really what I wanted to kind of focus on is in the work of addiction, one of the foundation, what at the deepest level, one of the simplest way to say it is the inability to sit with what's happening right now. And that is the addiction. Pema Chodron says it so simply: every addiction stems from this moment when I meet my edge and I just can't stand it. And I try to pat it or to soften it. And so that's what you're speaking to, right? If I'm not able to do that for myself, I'm not able to create a space where our clients get to feel that and have the experience. Because if they're running from all their deeper emotions and their unconscious patterns and afraid to touch that deeper place, and I'm facilitating a group, and that's a place where that reparative experience can happen, someone can recognize, I can touch that for 2 minutes and I'm going to survive, and I'm going to be witnessed by that, and I'm going to have a place to say, wow, that was really painful and scary, and I got through it. I don't need to go out and drink or use. So I love that you touched on that, and I don't know if there's more to say about that, but how do we ourselves learn to be with this moment where we don't need to change the channel or soften it or pat it?
That's exactly what you just talked about. It's having that experience. Whether you're the clinician or you're the person receiving the help and support, like, you have to have gone through these experiences. Look at the difference. It's this simple in my head, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it. If I say to you, because I've seen other people, let's say you're struggling getting through a weekend with your cravings and your urges and all that, but I haven't gone through that myself personally. I've seen a lot of people get through it, so I think you can do it. I think you have the strength to do it. I think you can cope with this issue. That's cool. It's nice to have people like hold you in that regard. But look at the difference between that and I believe you can do it. I believe you can do it because I'm drawing that from my own experience of I've been there. I've struggled with looking at the weekend like it's going to be this purgatory of nothingness and everything's pointed against me. And I got through it. So I can do it. I've done it. And I think you have it in you too. It's so different. So I think that's really the energy if you're going to put words to it and build language and name it, that doing the work and not doing the work is. I think you can do it because I've heard it's possible, I've read it in a book, or I've seen other people do it, or I believe it because I've experienced it, I've embodied it, and I want to work with you to walk through this.
Yeah, and what you're bringing to mind is spiritual practice, right? And it's interesting. I mean, I will just confess, it took me 20 years to hear spiritual practice. And what that meant is I'm going to practice this. And not because I'm going to have this blissful experience in a mindfulness process or a meditation, but because when I learn to do that, I can be that in the world. And that's fundamental in addiction work for me because, again, it's so much, it's too painful to be in this moment. So what you're saying is also, if someone's having cravings about the weekend and I'm working with them on a Thursday, it's like, let's not talk about the weekend. Let's talk about how to do it right in this moment.
Yeah.
Can we, for the next few minutes, be with what's emerging? What are you feeling? What's happening for you? What are you in touch with? And I know this is the work you do. We've worked with clients together, and they've said, people say, you sound like Burke. So I know we're doing very similar work just by that.
Absolutely.
And our clients always tell us, right? You know, and clients love you, of course, because you see them.
Yeah.
You see them, and I'm wondering maybe if that's what we can talk about. You know,
How to see them.
how to really witness someone,
Yeah.
not as their brokenness, not as this disease model, but as really seeing them from a holistic lens.
Yeah. That's deep. I just, even listening to you acknowledge me being able to see people kind of puts a knot in my throat and puts me back in my body. It's a compliment. So thank you. To be able to see people, it means you have to have the vulnerability and the willingness to look at yourself. And typically in the most unfavorable way, your shadow work, the hidden, suppressed, and denied aspects of yourself that you don't want anyone else to know about, that shows up all the time, but you're unwilling to acknowledge. So when I'm working with people, because I want to be seen and understood, I want to have a voice in a place. I want to feel as though I'm safe and I belong. That's my hope and my intention with other people. So when they walk in the room, the first thing I typically say when I'm meeting a new client is, I'm a stranger, but when you cross through that doorway, you become the teacher and I'm the student. There's no one better than you to teach me on what's going on in your life. So let me learn you. What does that look like? I'll guide the process because I paid for the words and I've gone through the experiences where I kind of, right. I know how to wander through the paths, but like, show me who you are. Like, take me into your world for a second. Like, what is it like sitting at dinner with your parents every night in that like seething silence? What is it like going to school and not feeling like you belong or that anyone really knows who you are? Because I think we can all, on some level, if we're willing to connect to those pieces. Especially if we've been damaged. I grew up being bullied in adverse environments and rough neighborhoods, and I'm willing to look at that now and understand like how scary it was. I don't have to be a man. I don't have to put the mask on. Part of why I developed into the athlete that I did was because I felt like I had to pull myself up out of that. But I mean, if I was to carry this facade as though I'm this man, this athlete who can take care of myself, I'd really be missing out on the parts that could actually help people. I was an insecure, shame-based little kid. I didn't feel as though people liked me. I didn't feel like I belonged, and I did things to connect. That's where the work is. That's where the magic is. And I think it's very refreshing when people speak on that level.
Wow. Woo! That was beautiful. Thank you. And that is a perfect representation to how I know you work with clients. It's not that we spend a lot of time self-disclosing. That's not what I'm talking about. But energetically, I'm in the room. And that's the difference, right? And for anyone who's watching that doesn't necessarily know what I mean, we don't really do a lot of self-disclosing in our work. In that, I don't say, oh, I had that experience too, and I had that too. But energetically, when I'm willing to hold the space of, wow, I really know where this person is, a person going through a difficult legal thing, I've gone through that.
Yeah.
A person that's gone through the deeper work of healing, shame and sexual trauma, I've been there. I'm not going to tell them I've been there, but there's an energy of holding that in the room that really helps.
Can I just acknowledge and thank you for speaking about that? I think in this day and age, men are starting to find their voices in speaking about childhood sexual trauma and being perpetrated on that kind of a way where we didn't have that podium before. And so even in facilitating groups in the past, I have felt as a clinician that I didn't have a voice to speak when some of the females would start to talk about their sexual trauma. But in my body, as someone who's experienced and is a survivor of sexual trauma from my past as well, it's like I feel them on a certain level. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to be in their shoes, but I know what my body felt like in that experience. And so thank you for bringing that up, because it's a big conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's coming to the surface right now. All the sexual trauma that a lot of women have experienced. And I'm guessing that there'll be a wave of men having more courage, and there have been, obviously, to talk about it as well. And
the time
you
is right.
talked about the mask of what it means to be a man. And it's interesting, I don't know if you even caught it, you said, I don't need to be a man. So even that, there's a message that a man is not supposed to, and it becomes a very complicated thing, working with heterosexual men who are sexually abused as children, and there's confusion around orientation sometimes, and getting through that and working through that, and what does it mean to be a man. So big topic, maybe another show that we can continue that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because a client said to me something that she didn't realize it was the biggest compliment possible. I don't know how she meant it, but I don't think she meant it as a big compliment.
But I took it this way.
I took it as a huge compliment. She said, when I leave your groups, I have less answers. I leave with more questions.
Living in the
that
question
was so exciting for me, because I said, thank you. That's my intention.
That's one of your things.
It's one of my things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Living in the question. So when I think I know the answer, I stay stuck, right? In a particular paradigm or a particular
It's a fixed
way.
mindset.
Yeah. And so what is the use of living in the question? What does that mean to you? I know that's also something for you that's a cornerstone of your own life and your work.
Yeah, and I could talk about that from a lot of different angles, dimensions, but I think I really figured out what this meant working with treatment-resistant teenagers. Living in the question, in my head, I know I always have a chance with my client to facilitate and help them with whatever their breakthrough is or their understanding, if they have just a grain of sand worth of curiosity. If they're coming in, even if they're this person doesn't know what they're talking about, I don't want to be here, my mom made me come, there's nothing wrong with me. Even if you can invoke curiosity in them, there's a little piece that'll keep them coming back. Because whether it's you're allowing them to look at themselves in a different way, or you're showing them that there's different ways that you can be approached in these situations, or your voice matters. Your experience can't be invalidated. No one can tell you how you feel. Those are the questions. So if I have all of your answers, I'm the false guru, and you shouldn't believe me, because the more questions that well, let me go back for a second. Living in the question is kind of we work with archetypes a lot. It's that seeker, the sage, that doesn't need to know the answer, which is finite and has a destination. It's that process and the journey of what can I uncover, and just being curious and not needing to know. That's where I fall in that line.
Yeah, and it opens up so much possibility.
Yeah.
I love that you framed it through the client's eyes, because that's really important, right? How many, especially adolescents, they have people telling them the answers all day long, and this is what you need to do, and this is what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And they often come from family systems where the parents have the answers, and so
It's frustrating.
Creating a space where it's guess what? I don't have any answers, but I do have some questions for you.
Yeah.
Or even better, what are your questions? What's
Right.
going on for you? What are you questioning? What are you curious about? Believe it or not, we only have about 3 minutes.
Whoa.
So I'm wondering if, to have it really open-ended, is there anything else you want to say about the conversation as we bring our two-part series here to a close about conscious recovery, around our own inner work, around how we, help ourselves reconnect, shame, any of the topics we've talked about?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Both from personal experience and from what I hear from my colleagues, oftentimes when we're looking to do our own work, it's like, where do I go? I've had that experience of having to avoid what meetings I go to because you don't want to run into clients and you don't want to make it uncomfortable for them. But it's also like going into even like a group setting or an experiential weekend where you're a therapist. At least for me, it's always like, is the person who's facilitating this going to allow me to be me, or are they going to have some preconceived notion that like I know it all and I'm a therapist and they're going to treat me differently? I know a lot of that's in my own head, but I guess simply put, how difficult is it for clinicians and people in the helping profession to find their own work, find places to feel safe to do their own work?
Well, I'm going to answer it with a question.
Sure.
And that is, what wants to be created here? Because as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the clinicians I know, in San Francisco and Marin, that's primarily where I do my work and where you do your work. All of us, and where do we have a place to go?
Yeah.
And I know for myself, I have an individual spiritual practitioner that holds that for me, that allows me to not, nothing that looks even close to fixing, just really being in the question with me and holding the space, and that's important for my individual work. So I'm wondering if that's something that might want to emerge.
Why not?
As a space for us to come together.
Let's do it.
Yeah, there you go.
There's the question.
We
don't need an answer.
So our time is up.
Okay.
In closing, I wonder if you have any deep, profound closing thoughts or anything else you want to say to kind of close this conversation off. Don't feel pressure, but you're totally on the spot.
Yeah, my final thoughts in talking about doing your own work, give yourself a chance. It's a scary, but it's a rewarding process. There's no better feeling than clearing the energy that's been stuck inside your body, whether that be through doing experiential work or just going and having honest conversations with people who you trust. And so it can be that simple. And I appreciate my time that I got to spend with you and these questions that you've posed. And if anyone wants to get a hold of me, I can be reached via email at bhalinovych@merewoodteen.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Burke, for being here and being in this incredible two-part series talking about conscious recovery. And to you, our viewer, thank you. We've been doing this show now. I think it's close to 3 years. We're close to our 100th episode. So I'm really incredibly grateful for our viewers that have been with us throughout this journey, you, our viewers. And in closing, what I want to say is please check out the Conscious Recovery Method and our new website, consciousrecovery.com. My book, Conscious Recovery, will be coming out, we're really, fingers crossed, into December or at very latest early January 2018. We're going to be doing a show talking more in depth about my book, Conscious Recovery. In the meantime, if you want to connect with me in any way, tjwoodward.com. Thank you so much for tuning in and being with us this evening, and good night.